What would you do if a little girl ran into a luxury hotel lobby, pointed at the billionaire owner in front of everyone, and shouted, "Daddy!" in front of cameras, investors, and his entire board of directors? He froze, because somehow she looked exactly like him. It was just another high-stakes morning at the Arlington Grand Hotel, Chicago's crown jewel of wealth and elegance. Billionaire owner Elias Warren stood beneath the vaulted ceiling of his flagship lobby, mid-signature on a contract worth $40 million. Guests dined on crystal plates. Executives whispered. Photographers stood ready. And then it happened. A little black girl, no older than 5, ran across the pristine marble floor. Her curls bounced, her pink sketch pad clutched to her chest, her smile wide and unafraid. She stopped right in front of Elias, pointed her tiny finger straight at him, and shouted, "Daddy!" The sound cracked through the room like a dropped wine glass. The pen in Elias's hand froze midair. Forks stopped clinking. Guests turned. His lead investor blinked. The silence was brutal. The girl didn't hesitate. She ran up and hugged his leg, looked up at him with joy and innocence only a child could carry, and repeated, "Hi, Daddy." Elias looked down at her, and the color drained from his face, the curve of her chin, the space between her eyes. Even the little dimple on her left cheek. It was like looking into a faded photo of his childhood self. He felt something stir in his chest, something ancient, something he'd spent years locking away. And before he could speak, before he could even breathe, a panicked voice sliced through the moment. "Maya!" A woman in a faded housekeeping uniform rushed through the stunned crowd, her face pale, her eyes wide with horror. Her name tag read, Mariah Lewis. She scooped up the girl and turned to Elias with terror in her voice. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Warren," she said breathlessly. "She must have seen your photo in a magazine or something. Kids say the silliest things. Please, she didn't mean—" But Elias wasn't listening. He was staring. "Her name is Maya?" he asked, his voice quiet. Mariah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, she's 5. From behind him, Elias's longtime COO, Gregory Chen, stepped closer and whispered, "Elias, do you remember Denver? The charity gala? 6 years ago?" Elias's face didn't move, but his eyes darkened. Yes, he remembered. Sort of. That night, the drinks, the hotel hallway, the blackout. He'd woken up alone in a luxury suite. The only clue? A tiny gold necklace left beside him. The pendant had a single engraved letter, M. He had kept it, quietly, for reasons he never fully understood. And now, standing in front of him, was a little girl, calling him Daddy, in a voice that could pierce armor. Sometimes truth doesn't knock on your door. It crashes into your world with a child's laughter and a single word, Daddy. And when that moment comes, it doesn't ask if you're ready. It just asks if you're human enough to respond. Elias didn't tell them to leave. He looked at Mariah and said quietly, "Please, take her to your room. I'll need to speak with you both." Mariah, clearly panicking, nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." She cradled Maya and hurried toward the staff hallway, eyes down, heart pounding. And Elias stood frozen, more shaken by a child's voice than by any market crash he'd ever faced. That night, in the privacy of his penthouse, Elias opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. The necklace was still there. Gold, delicate, with the same tiny engraved M. His hand trembled, and deep inside him, a storm began to rise. Not of scandal or fear, but of something far more dangerous to a man who thought he controlled everything. Hope. The next morning, the city outside Elias Warren's penthouse buzzed with its usual rhythm. Horns honking, lights blinking, stock tickers rolling. But inside his suite, time felt like it had stalled. He sat on the edge of the bed, the necklace still in his hand. A piece of the past so delicate, it now felt heavier than any merger deal he'd ever signed. Then came the knock. It was Gregory, his COO, holding a folder. "I've got what you asked for," Greg said quietly. Elias nodded. He didn't even need to open the folder. But he did. Inside were employment records for Mariah Lewis, background reports, dates. There it was. Denver Charity Gala, 6 years ago. She had been part of the hospitality staff, working the late-night shift. One name, one night, one consequence that changed everything. She never reached out to you? Greg asked. Elias shook his head. Never. Greg frowned. She's either incredibly discreet or terrified. Elias didn't answer. He already knew which one it was. Down on the sixth floor of the hotel, where the rooms were smaller, the wallpaper faded, and the floors creaked, Mariah sat on the edge of her bed, nervously twisting her fingers. Maya was asleep next to her, thumb in mouth, the faintest trace of a smile still on her lips. She had no idea what kind of earthquake her voice had set off in the lobby yesterday. Mariah stared at the old photo on her nightstand. It was worn and folded 100 times over. She was younger then, standing in front of a holiday tree in Denver. Her eyes were full of something she hadn't felt in years, quiet hope. She had taken that photo the morning after Elias had passed out in his suite. She had tucked him in, left a glass of water beside the bed, placed his necklace on the pillow, and then disappeared. She never meant to keep the truth from him. But what was she supposed to say? That she helped him in a moment of kindness and ended up raising a daughter alone? Would he have believed her or called it manipulation? She never took a cent, never asked for help. She just raised Maya as her own miracle. Until yesterday, when that miracle yelled "Daddy" in front of the entire lobby. That afternoon, a soft chime sounded as Elias entered the staff hallway. He walked past laundry carts and vacuum storage, far from the world of polished marble and champagne brunches. He knocked once on Mariah's door. She opened it slowly, surprised but not afraid. He looked at her, and for the first time in years, Elias didn't speak like a CEO, just a man. "We need to talk." She nodded and stepped aside. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor coloring. She looked up, smiled at him, and said cheerfully, "Hi, Daddy." Elias swallowed hard. "Can I sit?" he asked. Mariah gestured to the small chair near the window. They sat in silence for a few seconds, both trying to catch up with years of unanswered questions. "I didn't know," he said finally. "I figured you didn't," she replied. "You were not exactly conscious." "I remember the necklace," he said. Mariah glanced at his chest, saw the gold chain peeking out beneath his collar. "I left it because I didn't know how else to say goodbye." He looked at her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Mariah exhaled. "Because I didn't want Maya to grow up as a rumor. Or worse, leverage." "Is that what you think of me?" She shook her head. "Number. That's what the world does to girls like her." Commentary interwoven. Some truths are too fragile for the world to handle, so women like Mariah carry them alone. Not out of fear, but out of love. Because they know the headlines would devour their children long before the truth gets a chance to breathe. Elias leaned forward. "I want to know her. I want to be part of her life." Mariah hesitated. "Not for the cameras?" He shook his head. "No cameras, no press, just pancakes and crayons." Mariah smiled for the first time, a small, tired smile that still held power. "She calls you Daddy," she said softly. "She never met you, but she said the word like she knew." "I don't deserve it," Elias whispered. "But maybe," Mariah said, "you could try to." The next morning, Elias reserved a small breakfast room on the top floor of the hotel, away from cameras and whispers. No suits, no press. Just him, Mariah, and Maya. He wore jeans and a navy sweater, something he hadn't done in a decade. Mariah arrived with Maya in a yellow dress, clutching her coloring book. When they sat down, Maya slid a picture across the table. A tall man, a little girl, holding hands. The words above it said, "My dad." Elias blinked. "That's really good." Maya beamed. "I draw from real life." Mariah smiled into her coffee. Elias watched them both, overwhelmed by the simplicity of it. This wasn't about scandal. It was about a second chance. Billionaires talk about legacy like it's built in skyscrapers. But sometimes legacy shows up in crayon on a paper placemat and calls you dad like it's the most natural thing in the world. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the skyline glowed, Elias stood at the window of his office. He held the necklace in one hand and Mariah's file in the other. For the first time, he wasn't trying to control the narrative. He was trying to earn it. Gregory entered quietly. "You sure about this?" he asked. Elias turned. I want a paternity test. Not because I don't believe her, but because I need to make this right. With facts. With truth. Greg nodded. And after that? Elias looked out the window. After that, he said, I stop being a CEO who hides from the past and start being a father who shows up. The envelope arrived on a quiet morning, delivered by hand, sealed and clinical. Elias didn't open it right away. He stared at it for a long time, fingers tracing the edge like it held the weight of the past 6 years. Because it did. Inside, a single page confirmed what his heart already knew. 99.9% probability of paternity. Maya was his daughter. Elias sat down, feeling the weight lift and fall all at once. He had missed first steps, birthdays, scraped knees, lullabies. He had been absent, but not by choice. And now the question wasn't if he was her father, it was what he was going to do next. He didn't call a lawyer. He didn't draft a press release. He called Mariah. She answered after the second ring. It's confirmed, he said quietly. She didn't say anything for a moment, then a small breath. I figured. She has your stubborn eyebrows. I'd like to see you both, he added. No expectations. No pressure, just breakfast again. Maybe with less nerves this time. That afternoon, they met in the rooftop greenhouse, a forgotten part of the hotel once used for VIP dinners, now filled with sunlight and soft scents of herbs and damp earth. Maya ran between planters like a jungle explorer. Elias and Mariah sat at a small table, watching her play with an unfiltered joy he wished he could bottle. He had spent his entire life building an empire made of deadlines, decisions, and distance. But this little girl running barefoot through basil and lavender, was more powerful than any merger. Mariah looked at him. You know this doesn't get easier from here. I know, he replied. She'll ask questions about why you weren't there, about what people are saying, about what kind of man you are. He nodded. Then I'll answer. Every question, every time. They sat in silence, the sounds of Maya's laughter filling the greenhouse like music. That evening, as the city lights shimmered and the world kept turning, someone else was watching. His name was Edward Kane, head of public affairs at Reed Enterprises, and a man obsessed with control. He'd been monitoring whispers for days. Staff had noticed Maya. PR teams were piecing together timelines. And Edward didn't like surprises. He stormed into Greg's office without knocking. Is it true? He demanded. Did Elias father a child with a housekeeper and hide it for years? Greg didn't flinch. You're walking a dangerous line, Edward. You know what kind of story this will become? Greg stood. If you leak anything, if you breathe a single word to the press without authorization, you'll be out of this company before your badge deactivates. Edward's smirk didn't falter, but his silence said enough. The next morning, Mariah found a note slipped under her staff door. No signature, just 6 words. Eyes are watching. Choose your distance wisely. She crushed the paper in her fist. Maya sat on the bed beside her, humming while coloring another picture, unaware of the storm building outside the walls of their small room. Mariah didn't call HR. She didn't report it to security. She called Elias. When he heard her voice shake, he dropped everything. They met under the street lamp in the hotel's back garden, the soft glow flickering like a nervous candle. She handed him the note. His jaw tightened as he read it. I won't let anyone threaten you, he said firmly. This is your world, she replied. Not mine. People like me don't survive here without scars. He looked at her, really looked. And in that moment, Elias saw more than the woman who had carried his daughter in silence. He saw a survivor who had built a life out of nothing and never once asked for credit. Then let me share the burden now, he whispered. You and Maya don't have to do this alone anymore. She hesitated, then just once nodded. The following week brought headlines. An anonymous blog posted a grainy photo of Elias with Maya in the greenhouse. The caption was vague but suggestive. Hotel King's secret legacy? By nightfall, 2 more outlets had picked up the story. Social media speculated. Comment sections burned with curiosity and cruelty alike. Mariah stood in her room, reading the first wave of backlash. Gold digger, manipulator. Maid turned baby mama. Her hands trembled. Elias arrived minutes later. "I'm sorry," he said, standing in the doorway. "You trusted me, and I didn't protect that trust fast enough." She looked up, tired and furious. "I've lived in shadows for years, but Maya, she's not ashamed of you. She's proud to call you daddy." He stepped forward, knelt in front of her. "Then maybe it's time the world learns why." That evening, Elias sat with his media advisor and drafted a statement. No lawyers, no filters, just a video. He spoke into the camera not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a man trying to do better. "My name is Elias Warren, and I've built a lot of things in my life. Towers, brands, reputation. But none of them matter compared to what I found when a little girl looked at me and said, 'Daddy.'" He spoke about Mariah, about that night in Denver, about the 6 years he'd missed, about what he was trying to do now, not to correct the past, but to build a future. Within hours, the video went viral. Some mocked him, some doubted, but many understood. Even former critics called the video real and brutally honest. Mariah watched it with Maya curled up beside her, her small hand gripping her mother's tightly. "He said me," Maya whispered. "He said I changed him." Mariah smiled through the tears. "You did," but not everyone clapped. Inside a sleek downtown bar, Edward Kane slammed a glass on the table. "He's gaining sympathy," he hissed to the man beside him, a silent investor with a dangerous smile. "We push harder," the man replied. "You want him out? We go back to the beginning. Find the cracks in the foundation." The next morning, Elias arrived to find an envelope on his desk. Inside was a photo from decades ago. A younger Elias, a construction site, a tragedy, a fire. 2 workers had died. The cause had been ruled electrical, but Elias remembered the night all too well. He'd walked away from a dangerous call, said nothing, let others sweep it under the rug. And now someone wanted to use that silence. He turned to Greg. "Pull everything from that night, every file, every photo. I want to tell the truth before they twist it." He drove to the home of one of the victims' families, a widow who had never been offered closure. He sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. "I should have said something. I didn't. I was young and scared, but I'm not hiding anymore." She didn't forgive him, not fully, but she said 7 words that gave him strength. "Maybe your daughter won't carry your silence." Back at the hotel, Mariah opened the door to find Elias standing there with a small folder. "What now?" she asked. "We finish it," he said. That night he released a second video, this time not about Maya, but about the fire, the silence, the mistakes, the change. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he asked for accountability. The public response was staggering, and for the first time the conversation shifted. Not about scandal, not about image, but about growth, about fathers, about men choosing truth over control. 1 week later, Maya stood at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new housing project Elias had funded. Named not after himself, but after the 2 workers who had died. She held the scissors, smiled at the cameras, and said proudly, "My daddy builds homes now. Not just buildings." Elias knelt beside her, eyes full of something no boardroom had ever seen. "Peace." Mariah stepped beside them. He took her hand. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Because in a world that often tears down what it doesn't understand, they had built something no whisper could destroy, a family.